we got a little bit of history of the DNA testing. By the beginning of the 21st century, our society researchers had been searching for several decades for the immigrant ancestor without success. Then we began to hear about this new thing called DNA testing that could be used to establish family relationships. And most of us had heard about the testing the Melungeons were doing and Thomas Jefferson, and it proved that his had at least one son by his slave Sally Hemings. Then some of us began to wonder if that might help us with our research. And after some hunting, I sort of found which labs were doing it, and at that time there were only a couple. And what it cost and other basic information, and I presented that at the 2002 meeting. At that meeting, and let me mention, at the time we started this study, we were interested in one thing: the Y-DNA study and who matched who, because we wanted to know which Ganns matched Ganns in this country. And at that time, I had no idea we'd be able to match with some in England, so that's really been the dessert. At that meeting, the society voted to establish a DNA study for male members of the Gann family. And as I said, women were not, and there was no test available other than that then. The first sample to arrive at the laboratory was Bill's on July the 2nd. 11 more kits were received for processing by the end of July 2002. As soon as I returned home, I began, with the assistance of Geoffrey Gann in England, to secure addresses for Gann men there and sent a mass mailing to approximately 40 of them. The society paid for 12 marker analysis of the few men who were agreeable to submitting a sample. When the results of their DNA analysis came back, we learned that DNA of 3 Gann men in England matched the DNA of the Gann males in this country, and that, along with our archival evidence, led some of us to believe that our immigrant ancestor was English, and this DNA gave us confidence in our belief. Over the years, our study has grown. We've increased the analysis of markers to 37 for the majority of our group of matches. At present, we have a total of 175 members, as Bill mentioned. And we have learned that the results of 57 of those descendants, actually it's 58 now, in this country, are believed to be, all of them descend from Samuel and Elizabeth Gann, who were in Virginia in the 1750s. That means that all 57 of those Gann males who match share a common ancestor. To date, we have a total of 66 Gann males in our large matching group. Actually, it's 67. In January of this year, we sent DNA letters to 60 Gann males in England. Having worked for an organization that used mass mailing, I was aware of how inefficient that method is for recruiting, but so far we have not been able to come up with a better way. In fact, it's hard to get the names and addresses to mail to England, and I actually had to buy the group of that I got, and of those 60 letters that I sent, at least 10 of them were returned undeliverable. So if any of you find a good way to come up with addresses of males in England, we sure would like to have it, because Bill wants us to do one to any Ganns that live in Lincolnshire and up in that Midlands area. So far, we have not had anybody who actually lived there match. We had one man who said he was there. way back when we did the first testing, but he didn't match. Okay, so 5 Englishmen agreed to join the group, and I kept my fingers crossed that we'd come up with at least one match. So imagine my delight when the results showed that all 5 of the men tested turned out to be matches in our large matching group already tested. And you know what was especially nice about it is they all turned out to be pretty nice people. Yeah. And they had some problems. Apparently, the Postal Service in England has decreed that they are not going to send DNA samples through the mail. So every one of them had trouble, and they had to sort of finagle things around and slip them. And they went to the trouble to do that, which I really appreciated. And just briefly, I'll tell you a little bit about every one of them. Jeffrey, we've mentioned several times. He died recently, and he was retired for several years and was a retired high school principal. A lot of you remember Jeffrey. He came to at least 2 of our meetings, maybe 3, I'm not sure. But he was the sweetest old man you'd ever know. And the first time he came to visit us, I'd written and told him if he'd come over and go to a meeting, we'd like for him to stay with us. So, you know, I thought, oh, it's going to be this stiff upper-lipped Englishman. And so I actually went out and bought a weed eater that I could handle. And Jim helped me, and we smartened up the place, and I got everything all right. So I went to the airport to pick up Jeffrey, and here he comes, his shirt's hanging out here, his hair's going every which way, and it's unbuttoned. Yeah, he was something else, but I loved him. And I think sometimes he sort of irritated Jim a little bit, but that's not hard to do. Then the next one is Derek Gann, and he is living in Kent and Whitstable, and his ancestors have lived there since the 1700s. I've gotten to know Derek a lot better with this last mailing because I sent a letter to his son, not realizing he was Derek's son, and his wife started writing me, and the son is profoundly retarded. That's not a good word. I don't know what you're supposed to say now. Anyway, he can't even talk, you know. And Derek was a master carpenter and helped build some of the biggest houses in London. And he comes across as a really nice guy. Yeah, Anita's father, he was. And by the way, she lives in New Zealand. And it's some kind. Yeah. And what year was that? 94? Oh, when we had 2 Gann trips, which Chris managed for us, and they were really wonderful. We had a great time. And Anita worked with Bill to arrange a meeting for the Ganns that were there in the pub, right. There were a lot of them there because it was a smallish room and we could be packed. But anyhow, she's artistic apparently because she's head of some kind of art studio. Now the third one is Robert Gann, and Robert has retired in the last few years as an elevator engineer, and he now lives in Suffolk. And it's his ancestors that we're pretty sure he can really trace to Lincolnshire. When we tested him, he lived in London, and then he just disappeared. I couldn't get him. I wrote Peter's son, Ralph, and asked him to help me find him, but we never could find him. But this time, I sent another letter to Robert Gann, not realizing it was the same man, so we got back together. And then there's Peter, and Peter is retired, and I don't know what his career was. I wrote him, but he didn't get back to me. He is a member of our Gann at Facebook site, and He seems very personable. Um, and here's the one Bill says his ancestors lived in the Channel Islands. Several years ago, probably 25 or 30, had a correspondence with a Gann descendant who lived on the Channel Islands, but I can't even remember what her name is now. Then the 5 here is Dr. Michael Gann. He is a practicing physician in Cheshire, and his ancestors too are from Kent. Coming down to Nigel, and don't you love that name? That's perfect for England, isn't it? He's an educator in Chisleborough, Somerset, and according to something I found on the internet about him, he is regarded as one of the leading authorities on school governance in the UK. His ancestors are also from Kent. Okay. Then Richard, he's a businessman now who lives way up north in County Durham. And as Bill told you, his ancestors also come from Kent. Toby Gann. Toby was living in Houston, Texas, when we were doing these letters. And his letter went to his father, who lives in Kent. And then his father contacted Toby and told him to do the test, and he's an infield seismic geophysicist working for Schlumberger. Okay. Looks like Schlumberger to me. His father owns and operates a large farm in Kent. Now, these are some people we want to know, because that is prime territory. He's really nice, but he apparently is real busy. I think he goes out to the North Sea looking for oil. Then there are a couple here that I don't know where they come from. In fact, I know little about them. Chris was responsible for getting him to test. There's Richard Gann, Dick. And he's a match, but he died just a little bit after we did the analysis, and we never did land where he came from. And he had an uncle in Georgia, Stone Mountain, Georgia, who also did these tests. And right. Oh, yeah. Really? Yeah. Well, we don't know where to put them. Now, in addition to the Y-DNA analysis, we've done the tests that you can see here, and on the right is the number of people who've done them. I don't know anything about autosomal DNA. I've done my own. I know what little bit is obvious to anybody, but when I hear people who really know, like Thea, I'm sort of, I don't know what to think. I just have to shake my head. So I'm happy to put orders for you, help you in any way I can, but do not ask me to tell you what it all means. Now, I was going to go through this paragraph down here about the haplogroup, but David's already gone into that in much greater detail. And that looks like it's something that's really going to turn out to be interesting, and I'm glad David is really interested in it. The next page is a chart graph that just shows you the number of people who joined and how it's gradually gone up over the years. Just a little point of interest. Then if you go over here to the map of England showing the counties, these numbers correspond to the numbers by the names of the people we've tested in England. And number 3, who was Robert Gann. He's from Lincolnshire. Then Jeffrey said he was from Essex. That's number 1. I think Bill says now he came from Lincolnshire also. Is that correct? And then all the rest of them, number 2 and 4 through 8, all came from Kent. But we know that there were no Ganns in that area that anybody has traced back prior to the early 1740s. I think it's like around 1740. So those had to come to Kent from somewhere else. And apparently that somewhere is going to be up in the Midlands, probably Lincolnshire. And Bill's working on it, and hopefully something will turn up. Just keep on keeping on.